can this be the same guy?
That's you?
That's me.
Wow. Hold on, let's hold that up. Hold that up. Wow.
Yep.
Wow. Is that how you look when you were...
Hello.
Hey!
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was all of 32.
And what LP is this now? Is that...
That's The Crane.
The Crane?
It
Okay.
was supposed to be my solo album, but the label at the last minute decided I would be more marketable as a band. So
Okay.
these other four fellas were thrown together. Actually, my brother did play drums on the album, and Les, the keyboard player, did some background singing. But this guy we just brought in to take the picture.
Okay.
He would have been the guitar player had Crane actually been a band, but
Oh, okay.
never happened. So.
But so to say, yeah, you've been in like the heart of the business and the commercial business, and you know, tell us about a little bit about the pitfalls of actually getting a record deal and then not panning out.
Well, what I tell a lot of people is that a record deal is where your problems begin, because you like myself, I had played clubs for years and I just hated it, and
Yeah.
every morning I'd wake up and say, I'm quitting. I'm not going to do this anymore.
Right.
And there came a point in time where I actually did quit, and it was at the same time another fella in the band was recruited by somebody building a supergroup. So my manager and I decided, we're going to go after the real deal. Of course, what I didn't think about was the fact that now all of a sudden I have no money coming in.
Yeah.
So that gets a little difficult. And then what a lot of people forget, that when you sign a record deal, you're given an advance. You're given money up front to record the album, but that's only a loan, and
Right.
you owe the record company that money.
You own for every
and
drumstick.
until you break even,
Yeah.
until you sell enough records to break even. Of course, an artist usually only gets 4, 5, maybe 6%. I got an unprecedented 8%
Right.
of retail, and I was also allowed to self-produce my own album, which
That's
was
a good
pretty
thing.
much unheard of
Yeah,
with any major label. But had I not had the experience as an engineer in the studio, I don't think they would have ever allowed it. But my album budget was $40,000,
Right.
and I wound up spending $90,000.
So you end up in debt.
Not
to
a
the
penny
guy.
of which they'll ever get back because
Right.
the
Yeah.
album tanked. But
I remember hearing like Rick Ocasek, I think, the Cars, after their first or second album, where they had like 5 hits on each record.
most bands are bankrupt before they ever get out.
He said by the time we got done paying off all the promotion and the tours and the equipment and the recording time, we had enough to buy a pair of drumsticks. So it's like basically you have to go through that kind of thing and get to your
You
third
operate in
album
the red
before
for
you can.
years. It's ridiculous.
It's-
And of
it's
course,
treacherous.
touring, the expense of touring is.
So how did you end up getting to the recording engineering business?
Well, as a youngster, I was always interested in tinkering and electronics, and I played in bands through high school and into college, and my dad was pretty adamant about me not being a musician for a living, and wanting to please him and to take good advice, I thought, well, let's see, what's the next best thing? I love to fool with tape recorders and recording and all. A recording engineer, wow, that sounds like the ticket.
Right.
So I went down to Criteria Studios, and it actually was a visit to do a term paper for junior college,
Okay.
and met the owner down there and looked around and did my little paper, and then when I graduated, I applied. Well, actually, I'd applied long before,
Yeah.
and of course there were no openings. So the day I was hired to work at a company in Fort Lauderdale as an electronic technician, that was my AS degree was in electronics technology.
Okay.
The day I was hired at that company, I also got the phone call from Criteria.
Right.
So that was the beginning of a tremendous career. I started there in late 1966, and after about 6 weeks, the owner, Mac Emmerman, came to me and he said, look, we just don't have enough business to warrant me having you here. He says, but I'm having a recording console built by a guy up in Fort Lauderdale named
Right.
Jeep Harned.
Okay.
He said, if you'll go up there and work for Jeep, he needs somebody. He says, maybe when things get better down here, we can have you back. So I went to work for Jeep Harnett, who, of course, became the founder of MCI, which is probably one of the largest manufacturers of recording equipment in history.
Yeah.
And I worked for Jeep for a year.
Okay.
And a fellow named David Harrison, who also became a well-known console designer, at that time was working as an engineer of Criteria and playing saxophone for Wayne Cochran.
Okay.
He decided he wanted to go back out on the road, so when he left,
Right.
I got his job.
Cool.
So
And since then you had quite a remarkable roster of people that you've worked with now. You've engineered or assisted engineered, I would imagine, for...
well, I sort of started as an assistant and
Okay.
then became a senior engineer.
Okay. Because you recorded Eric Clapton,
Yes.
Layla, on the Layla sessions, Derek and the Dominoes, America, Delaney and Bonnie, Aretha Franklin.
Yes.
You know, how was Aretha like? That must have been great, you know.
Those sessions were probably the most exciting, and I'm sorry now that I didn't have the appreciation back then to appreciate what I was witnessing.
Yeah.
Aretha would record with a full live band, everything.
Yeah.
And all the musicians in the room.
Right.
You'd have Jerry Wexler sitting next to Aretha, coaching her,
Right.
making her feel comfortable. Tommy Dowd was in the control room with me at the board.
Yeah.
Arif Mardin was directing the musicians. The energy and the chemistry was just unbelievable. Those were probably the finest sessions I was ever a part of, and one of them I got a gold record for, Don't Play That Song, which was on her Spirits in the Dark album, or Spirits Having Fun, I forget
All right.
the name, but I got a gold record for that, and for Brooke Benton's Rainy Night in Georgia.
Okay. You also was a session singer and guitarist for many years. Eddie Money?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about Eddie Money.
Yeah. Yeah.
How was that? Tell me about how was Eddie Money like? How was that?
Well, I didn't really spend much time. You know, recording sessions are usually, they start out with basic tracking of instruments, and then there's some overdubs, and then maybe lead vocal overdubs. I was basically hired to do background vocals with the band's keyboard player. I can't remember his name now.
Right.
And there was one song called "I Think I'm in Love" that Tommy Dowd wanted an additional guitar part on, so I did a
Right.
real simple little.
So you came in to do
guitar
the
part on that.
overdubs for
Yeah.
those
But
sessions.
Eddie, I didn't see much of him,
Okay.
and what I did see of him, he was kind of like quiet in
Yeah.
the corner, moody. But
Yeah. You work with the Bee Gees too?
yes.
Yeah, okay. Tell me about the Bee Gees a little bit.
Well, the first encounter I had was when I first. See, I was at Criteria 2 times. The first time was from 67 to 72, and then from 79 to 82.
Okay.
Now, the second time, and I came back from California in 79, the Bee Gees were already had already set up camp at Criteria, and between their records, Robin and Mars were producing a singer named Jimmy Ruffin, brother of David Ruffin.
All right.
And I was the assistant engineer on that session. Dennis Hetzendorfer was the senior.
All right.
And again, my whole life is right place at right time. There was a tracking date, and they had their regular drummer, and Blue Weaver on keys, and Alan Kendall on guitar. George Perry was supposed to play bass, and he didn't show up.
All right.
And we're sitting there, and there's 3 guys, no bass, and I'm sitting in the control room, and I'm thinking, God, it sounds really...
Yeah.
So I kind of snuck out in the studio and grabbed the Fender bass out of the corner and sat down and said, look, just, for now, when George shows up, because, we got to hear some bass. And Robin and Mars did. I mean, Mars is a bass player. I would have thought he would have gone out. But nobody said a word, so I quietly went out there and got a chart and wound up playing on 4 songs on the album.
That's cool. That's really cool, man. All right, let me see. All right. You were influenced by your mom.
My mother, actually.
Yeah. She played guitar.
She started to play guitar when we moved down here from Philadelphia. She bought a little baritone tenor guitar. Here, go ahead and pause it, because this is history.